The sound of a gunshot tore through the Montana spring air as Harriet Zimmerman ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart hammering so hard it drowned out every other sound. She had been on the trail west for 3 weeks, part of a small wagon train bound for Helena City, when the bandits struck without warning. Now, as the scent of gunpowder mixed with crushed wildflowers, she found herself crouched in the grass, trapped between life and death, her future hanging by a thread thinner than sewing silk. "Miss, you hurt?" a deep voice called through the smoke. Harriet peered cautiously over the wagon's splintered edge. Through the dust and gunfire, she spotted a tall man, crouched behind a boulder, rifle in hand, eyes sharp and steady. His clothes were trail-worn, denim dark with dust, vest faded from sun, hat brim low, but he moved with the calm of a man who had stared down danger before. "I'm all right," Harriet called back, though her voice trembled. "But they've got us surrounded." "Name's Everett Edwards," the man shouted, checking his rifle. "Stay low. I'll clear us a path." Quote. Before she could answer, he rose from cover and fired with quick, practiced precision. 2 shots cracked the air, and the remaining bandits scattered into the pines. Their hoofbeats faded until all that remained was silence, and the harsh sound of Harriet's own breathing. She stood slowly, her blue traveling dress torn and dusty. Around her lay the wreckage of the wagon train, supplies strewn across the meadow, 2 wagons overturned, and, heartbreakingly, several travelers who would never rise again. "They're gone," Everett said, stepping closer. His rifle hung loosely now, but his eyes scanned the tree line. "They might circle back. We need to move quick." Harriet swallowed the lump in her throat as she knelt beside one of the fallen. "The others?" she asked quietly. "4 dead," he replied. 3 ran for the woods. The bandits took most of the horses. His voice softened. "You were traveling alone?" "My uncle was with me," she whispered, looking toward the still body lying beneath a torn tarp. "He's among them." Quote. Everett removed his hat, the gesture simple yet full of respect. "I'm sorry, Miss Zimmerman." Her head lifted in surprise. "How do you know my name?" "I met your uncle in Helena a few weeks ago," he said gently. "He spoke of bringing his niece west. I was tracking those same bandits when I heard the shots." The weight of her loss pressed down until it was hard to breathe. The West had promised her a new beginning after Boston's grief had taken everything she loved. Now it felt like the wilderness had swallowed that dream whole. "What will I do now?" she whispered. "First," Everett said, glancing toward the horizon, "we bury the dead. Then, if you'll allow, I'll see you safe to my ranch. You can rest and decide your next move there." As the sun began its descent, the 2 of them worked in silence. They dug shallow graves with tools salvaged from the wagons, marking each with rough wooden crosses. When Harriet placed her uncle's spectacles atop his resting place, her tears finally came. Everett stood quietly beside her, hat in hand. "He wanted to give me a fresh start," she said brokenly. "The West still can," Everett answered, "just not the way you planned." By the time the last cross stood in the fading light, the air had turned cold. Everett saddled his chestnut gelding and secured Harriet's small trunk behind the saddle. "Have you ever ridden astride?" he asked. "Only side saddle," she admitted, "and rarely at that." "Well," he said, offering his hand, "today brings many firsts." Harriet hesitated before grasping his calloused hand. The moment she swung up behind him, modesty forgotten, her heart skipped. The warmth of his back, the solid feel of his strength beneath the worn fabric of his shirt, it steadied her trembling hands as much as it unsettled her. "Hold tight," Everett said as he nudged the horse forward. "The trail's rough." They rode through the deepening dusk, pine branches brushing against their shoulders. The rhythmic sway of the horse lulled Harriet into a strange calm, broken only by flashes of pain in her legs, unused to the motion. When they stopped at a creek to rest, her feet barely held her weight. "You're doing fine," Everett said, catching her elbow when she nearly stumbled. "Most city folk would have quit by now." "I'm crying on the inside," she said, managing a faint smile. He chuckled quietly. "Good. Crying wastes water out here." As night settled over the land, the moon rose silver over the mountains. When they crested a ridge, Everett reined in the horse. "There," he said, pointing to a valley below. In the moonlight, Harriet saw a sturdy log house nestled among the pines, smoke rising faintly from its chimney. Corrals and a barn stood nearby, a creek glinting like liquid silver. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's home," he said simply, and they rode down the slope toward it. A lantern glowed on the porch as they approached, and an older woman stepped outside. "Everett Edwards," she scolded, hands on hips. "You had me worried sick." 3 days gone without word. She stopped short at the sight of Harriet. "Mercy, who's this?" Quote, "This is Miss Harriet Zimmerman," Everett explained, dismounting. "Her wagon train was attacked. She's lost everyone." The woman's stern face softened at once. "Oh, child, come inside. You're safe now." The warmth of the ranch house was almost unbearable after so much cold fear. Within the hour, Harriet found herself bathed, dressed in a borrowed nightgown, and seated before a roaring fire with a bowl of stew warming her hands. "Rosa's been with me since I built this place," Everett said, settling into a chair across from her. "Keeps everything running when I'm gone." "You're lucky," Harriet said softly. "I know it," he replied, "and you're welcome to stay as long as you need. Once you're rested, we'll figure what's next." "Thank you," she murmured. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Rosa smiled as she gathered the dishes. "What matters is you're safe now. You look about ready to fall over, dear." Harriet didn't argue. When she finally lay down in the small guest room, exhaustion claimed her at once. Morning brought pain in every limb, and a wave of grief that threatened to drown her all over again. A gentle knock came at the door. "Breakfast's ready," Rosa called. "I left some clothes that might fit." The calico dress was worn but clean. Harriet dressed and joined Rosa in the kitchen, where sunlight streamed across wooden counters, and the smell of baking bread filled the air. "Thank you," Harriet said. "For everything." Rosa nodded. "We take care of our own here, child. You'll find your strength again." Harriet wanted to believe her, but as she looked out the window toward the mountains, she wondered if strength was enough to face a life that had been remade by loss. Outside, a familiar figure rode toward the barn, sunlight glinting off his hat brim. Everett Edwards, her rescuer, her protector, and perhaps the only person in this vast land who understood just how much it hurt to start over. She didn't yet know it, but this ranch, and the man who called it home, would change her life forever. The days that followed unfolded with quiet rhythm at Shadow Pine Ranch. Morning began before dawn, when the first light touched the pine tops and mist curled low across the valley. Rosa hummed softly as she stirred breakfast, while Harriet helped set the table, learning each small task as if she were stitching together a new life from broken pieces. Everett was gone most of the day, riding the property lines, checking fences and cattle. At supper he spoke little, his deep voice steady but reserved. Yet sometimes Harriet caught him watching her across the firelight, eyes thoughtful, as though he were trying to read a book written in a language he almost understood. On the fourth morning, the calm shattered. Distant shouting carried from the pastures, followed by galloping hooves. Harriet hurried outside just as Everett and several ranch hands thundered into the yard. One of them slumped over his saddle, blood staining his sleeve. Rustlers hit the north pasture. Everett called as he dismounted. "Jake's been shot." Without thinking, Harriet ran forward. "Bring him inside," she ordered. Quickly. The men hesitated, surprised by her command, but obeyed. Inside the bunkhouse, she pushed a table clear and helped lift the wounded hand onto it. The bullet had torn through the shoulder. Blood soaked the man's shirt. "Whiskey, clean rags, and a knife heated in the fire," she said briskly. "Hold him steady." "Miss, you sure you know what you're doing?" one rancher asked uncertainly. "My father was a doctor," Harriet replied, her voice firm. "Now move." For the next hour, she worked with calm precision. She extracted the bullet, cleaned the wound, and stitched it closed with the steady hands of someone born to heal. The men watched in silence, awe replacing doubt. When she finally straightened, her sleeves stained crimson, she looked at Everett. "He'll live," she said. "The bullet missed anything vital. He just needs rest." Everett nodded, his blue eyes full of something unspoken. "You just saved his life, Miss Zimmerman." "Anyone would have tried," she said quietly. "No," he replied. "Not anyone could have done what you did." That night, while Rosa cooked stew for the recovering Jake, Harriet stood by the window, staring at the rain streaking the glass. When Everett joined her, she didn't turn. "You're quiet," he said. "I was thinking how quickly things change," she replied. "A week ago I was traveling to Helena, hoping to teach school. Now I'm here, sewing up bullet wounds." He leaned against the wall beside her. "Do you regret it?" Quote, "No," she said after a moment. "Boston was full of ghosts. Out here, I can breathe again." Everett nodded slowly. "The West does that. It strips away everything but what's real." Their eyes met in the dim light, and for a moment, words felt unnecessary. There was understanding there. Two people shaped by loss, still standing. The next morning dawned clear. Everett saddled his horse while Harriet hung laundry in the sun. When he rode up, his shadow fell across her hands. "It's something, isn't it?" he said, gesturing to the valley. "It's beautiful," she answered. "You've built something worth fighting for." "It wasn't easy," he admitted, "but nothing worth keeping ever is." He hesitated. "Riders are heading to Helena today. I can have them ask about teaching positions, if you'd like." Her chest tightened. "That would be kind. I was a teacher's assistant back east." "Then you'll have your answer soon," he said, and rode off. By midday, the ranch was peaceful again. Harriet helped Rosa with chores, but her mind lingered on the man who had risked his life for strangers and spoke so little about himself. When he returned that evening, dust-covered and weary, she found herself watching the way he moved, the quiet confidence, the patience. He carried the air of a man who had known pain and learned to live with it. After supper, Everett motioned toward the small door beside the fireplace. "Ever see a ranch library?" he asked, half smiling. "Library?" she repeated, surprised. Inside, shelves lined the walls, filled with books worn from years of use. "They keep me company during long winters," he said. "Shakespeare, Dickens, a bit of Thoreau." She ran her fingers along the spines, eyes wide. "You read all these?" "Most of 'em," he replied. "A man can't live on cattle talk alone." She smiled softly, selecting a volume of poetry. "May I?" "Consider them yours while you're here." Quote, that night, she read by lamplight in the main room while Everett sat across from her, a book open in his hands. The fire crackled, filling the silence with warmth instead of emptiness. By the time the clock struck 10, Harriet closed her book reluctantly. "I should sleep," she said. Everett looked up, his eyes shadowed but kind. "You've made this place feel less empty," he said quietly. Her heart stuttered. "Then I'm glad I came." The following morning, shouting once again shattered the peace. Harriet rushed outside to see riders galloping from the north, one shouting breathlessly, "Rustlers!" They came back, took near 30 head. Everett barked orders, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. Men mounted horses, rifles in hand. Harriet watched him swing into the saddle, jaw set like stone. "Be careful," she said before she could stop herself. He met her eyes. "Always." Then he was gone in a thunder of hooves. Hours later, they returned, tired, bruised, and angry. Everett dismounted, blood streaking his temple. "Everett," Harriet cried, rushing to him. "You're hurt." Quote. He brushed her worry aside. "Just a graze," his voice dropped. "But it's worse than we thought. Those men, Blackwell's gang, they've been hitting ranches for months." At the name, even Rosa's face went pale. "James Blackwell," she whispered. "The devil himself." Everett's eyes met Harriet's. "They're the same outlaws who attacked your wagon train." "I'd bet my life on it." The room fell silent, the weight of the truth settling heavy between them. "What will you do?" Harriet asked. "Protect what's mine," he said simply, "and that includes everyone under this roof." That night, long after Rosa retired, Harriet couldn't sleep. The wind howled against the windows, and fear coiled in her chest. She thought of the men who'd murdered her uncle, the same men now closing in on the only safety she'd found. A soft knock came at her door. Everett stood there, hat in hand. "I saw the light," he said quietly. "Thought you might want this." He held out a small revolver. "It's loaded. 5 shots." She hesitated, staring at it. "I've never fired one." Quote, "I'll teach you tomorrow," he said. "For tonight, just having it nearby might help you rest easier." Their fingers brushed as she took the weapon, and something passed between them, wordless but strong. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. "Good night, Harriet." When the door closed, she sat on the edge of her bed, the revolver heavy in her hands. She thought of how her life had turned in a single moment of violence, and how this quiet, steadfast man had become her anchor in the storm. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley, and Harriet knew that peace at Shadow Pine Ranch was about to end. The danger was coming closer, and nothing would ever be the same again. The next dawn broke heavy and gray, clouds gathering low over the Montana peaks. Everett was already on the porch, rifle in hand, eyes sweeping the distant ridge. Harriet joined him quietly, her heart pounding with dread she couldn't shake. "Blackwell's men will come," Everett said without turning. "Question is when." Before Harriet could reply, a rider appeared from the east, galloping hard. Dust rose in his wake as he reined in before the porch. "They hit the Stanton Ranch," he gasped. "Burned it to the ground. They're heading this way." Everett's expression hardened. "Then we're out of time." He gathered his men and spoke with the calm authority of someone born to lead. "No one leaves their post. We fight smart. Every bullet counts." When he turned to Harriet, his voice softened. "You'll stay inside. Windows low, cellar if it comes to it. Understood?" She nodded, though every instinct screamed to stand beside him. By noon, the stillness was unbearable. The air felt electric, every sound magnified. The creak of leather, the distant call of a hawk, the nervous shifting of horses. Harriet waited in the kitchen, revolver tucked into her apron pocket. Bandages, whiskey, and clean cloth lay ready on the table. Then came the thunder of hooves. Everett's shout carried through the house. Positions, followed by the sharp crack of gunfire. Harriet flinched as bullets tore through the windows, splintering wood. She crouched behind the heavy oak table, praying under her breath. The sound was deafening. Shouting, firing, the chaos of battle. When the shooting eased for a heartbeat, Everett appeared in the doorway, hat gone, blood streaking his temple. "You all right?" She nodded, trembling. "They're all around." He reloaded swiftly. "Stay down," he ordered. "We'll drive them off." The fight raged for what felt like hours. Harriet lost track of time until an explosion rocked the house. The barn had gone up in flames. Smoke poured through the shattered windows. Everett ran back inside, coughing. "They're trying to burn us out," he said. "We have to fall back to the root cellar." With Rosa's help, they carried the wounded below ground, sealing the trap door as smoke thickened above. The small earthen room trembled with each distant gunshot. Harriet knelt beside Everett as he checked his pistol, his face grim. "They'll burn the house next," he said quietly. "When they do, we run for the creek. Keep low, don't stop." Before she could answer, a voice bellowed from outside, cruel and mocking. "Everett Edwards, bring out the woman, and maybe I'll let the rest live." Harriet froze. "He wants me," she whispered. Everett's jaw tightened. "He'll never have you." The heat above grew unbearable. Smoke drifted down the stairs. Everett met her gaze. "It's time." He pushed open the cellar door, and they emerged into chaos. The roof was ablaze, the yard lit by hellish orange light. Everett and his men returned fire, covering Harriet and the wounded as they fled toward the creek. "Run!" he shouted. She ran, her lungs burning, the revolver clutched tight. Behind her came the sound of hooves and gunfire. Everett fired again and again until a cry tore from his throat. He stumbled, clutching his leg. "Everett!" she screamed, turning back. "Go!" But she didn't. She reached him, ducked under his arm, and half dragged, half carried him toward the water. Bullets tore the ground around them, but somehow they reached the creek, plunging into the icy flow. Everett shielded her with his body as they stumbled across to the far bank and collapsed among the trees. "Leave me," he rasped. "You can still make it." "Stop saying that," she snapped through tears. "I'm not leaving you." They crawled into a thicket, hidden by brambles. Harriet tore strips from her petticoat and bound his bleeding thigh. Everett gritted his teeth, face white with pain. "You're brave," he murmured. "Braver than any man I've known." "Save your strength," she whispered, pressing her hand to his cheek. "You'll need it." For hours they hid, listening as riders searched the woods. Only when the forest fell silent did Harriet help Everett to his feet. "There's a line shack 2 miles north," he said weakly. "If we can make it." They walked through the darkness, leaning on each other, step by agonizing step. When Everett finally collapsed, Harriet saw the cabin, a small shadow among the trees. With every ounce of strength left, she dragged him inside. The shack was bare but solid. She found a lantern, a few rags, and a bottle of whiskey. The bullet had gone clean through his thigh, but infection had already set in. "This will hurt," she warned. "Can't hurt worse than it does," he said, trying to smile. She cleaned the wound and stitched it shut by lamplight, her hands trembling. Everett stayed silent, jaw clenched, until it was done. Then he exhaled, exhausted. "You did well," he murmured. "Didn't think an angel could sew a man back together." "Then you haven't met many angels," she said softly. He smiled faintly before sleep claimed him. By morning, his fever burned high. Harriet worked tirelessly, cooling his skin, forcing water between his lips. Nothing helped. When he awoke, delirious, he whispered her name like a prayer. "Go to Valley Springs," he croaked. "Find Rosa. Bring help. I can't leave you." "You have to," he insisted. "Please." Tears streaked her cheeks as she leaned close. "Then promise you'll hold on till I return." His hand found hers, weak but steady. "I love you, Harriet," he whispered. "Didn't mean to, but I do." Her voice broke. "Then live for me. I love you too." At dawn, she set out alone, moving through the forest like a hunted thing. Twice she hid as Blackwell's riders passed close enough to hear their spurs. By dusk, exhausted and bleeding from thorns, she saw the lights of Valley Springs. Rosa was there, along with the town's doctor and men ready to ride. Within the hour, a rescue party was formed. They reached the shack by nightfall. Everett was barely alive, but breathing. "Will he make it?" Harriet asked as the doctor worked. The man's face was grave. "It'll be close. Keep talking to him." When Everett stirred, she took his hand. "You're safe," she whispered. "You'll live." His eyes fluttered. "Hurts," he murmured faintly. "Hurts too much." She guided his hand to her shirt, pressing it there over her heart. "Then hold my shirt till it doesn't." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before he slipped into sleep. Days later, he woke to find her dozing by his bedside. "You came back," he said softly. "I promised I would." She answered through tears. Blackwell's gang was soon hunted down. The outlaw himself died by Rosa's shotgun when he came to Valley Springs looking for vengeance. His reign ended as quickly as it began. Everett's wounds healed slowly. When he was strong enough, Harriet told him what the doctor had said. "Shadow Pine is gone," she whispered. "The fire took everything." He took her hand. "Not everything. You're still here." Months passed. Together they rebuilt the ranch from ashes, stronger, wider, brighter. When the first snow fell, Everett knelt before Harriet beneath the same ridge where they'd once looked down at the valley. "When I found you behind that wagon," he said, "I thought I was saving your life. Didn't know you'd end up saving mine." Tears filled her eyes as he took her hand. "Harriet Zimmerman, will you be my wife?" "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling with joy. Their wedding took place on Christmas Day, 1872, in Valley Springs, small church. Rosa wept openly as the couple exchanged vows, and the townsfolk cheered for the love born from tragedy. In the years that followed, Shadow Pine Ranch thrived again. Harriet studied medicine under the town doctor, becoming the valley's healer. Everett worked the land, stronger than ever. On warm evenings, they sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the mountains. Harriet would rest her head on Everett's shoulder, his arm around her waist. "You ever regret it?" he'd ask softly. "Never," she'd answer. "Every road, every scar led me home, to you." And somewhere in the still Montana twilight, the echo of that promise remained. Two hearts that refused to break, bound forever by one whispered vow. "Then hold my shirt till it doesn't."